You're watching part of our series on building garage storage racks. The racks are perfect for beginners, cheap to build, and are an excellent storage solution. In this episode, we will be building the 4 wide by 4 tall storage rack. The video is split into two parts. First, the Home Depot version tailored for their 27-gallon HDX black and yellow totes. Second, a modified design to fit the 27-gallon black and yellow totes from Costco, Lowe's, and Sam's Club. After nearly a year of full-time work, I am excited to introduce SnapSort AI. It's a system designed to help you manage the items in your totes. It's an organization app where AI does all the boring parts for you. Slap a sticker on your tote, scan it once. Now it's in the app, ready for your items. Snap a photo of your item. AI reviews the shot and writes out the description terms automatically. No typing necessary, making searching for your items later easy. Months later, search for boxing gloves. The app points you right to the tote. No more digging. You are in control of borrowing, moving, or deleting items. Invite your family to your workspace and organize together. Free to try on iOS and Android. Link below. This part of the video is for the 4 wide by 4 tall tote rack. This rack is specifically designed for the Home Depot 27-gallon HDX totes. The overall dimensions of the rack are 88 3/4 of an inch long. The rack is 20 1/4 inches deep, and it is 67 11/16 inches tall. The first thing you're going to need to do is gather your supplies. In this case, you're going to need 22 2x4s that are 8 feet long. The first cut that you're going to make will be these 32 identical shelf supports. The 2x4s need to be cut to 28 1/4 inches long. And if you notice on the ends here, I cut the shelf supports at 45 degrees for two reasons. One, easier sliding. The angle guides the tote into the rack. And two, tote protection. It prevents the tote flaps from catching on the otherwise sharp 90-degree edge. So how do you make this cut? It's simple. You take your 28 1/4 inch 2x4, and then about halfway through the 2x4, 3/4 of an inch, cut off this blue part at 45 degrees. And then go ahead and repeat that on the other side as well. The next step is going to be to create these ladder structures. So we have our shelf supports here from the previous step, and now we're introducing this green component. It's a 2x4 that is 64 11/16 inch long, and we're going to attach the two together. The spacing should be as follows. The first one is 11 inches from the edge here. The next one is 12.5 inches, 12.5, 12.5, and then the last one here should be 2 3/16 of an inch from the edge. All right, so to connect these two components, you're going to need to use 2.5 inch screws. Don't use longer screws so they don't poke through to the other end. Pre-drill and countersink the screws. This is important to prevent the wood from splitting. I also recommend that you add wood glue for added strength. So you're going to need a total of 5 of these components, 5 of these single-sided ladder structures. Now, some of these are going to undergo a modification. The modification is you're going to add one more layer of shelf supports directly on top of the other layer. So the spacing is going to be exactly the same. 11 inches from the edge, 12.5 inches here, 12.5 here, 12.5 here, and you're going to be left with 2 3/16 of an inch on the edge there. So you're going to attach the shelf supports again with 2.5 inch screws, pre-drill, countersink, and use wood glue for additional strength. You should have a total of 3 of these double-sided ladder structures and then 2 that are single-sided. Now you need to put everything together. So we have our single-sided ladder structure here, and we are introducing a new 2x4. This is in blue, It is 88 and 3/4 of an inch long. These are identical. So add the single-sided ladder structure to the blue component. The ladder structure needs to face inward, and you're going to use 3.5-inch long screws to attach that. I definitely recommend that you use wood glue, pre-drill, and countersink the holes there. Next, you're going to add the second single-sided ladder structure. So just like before, it needs to be facing inward. You're going to be using 3.5-inch screws, pre-drill, countersink, and use wood glue. Now we're going to be adding the double-sided ladder structures. These are going to go on the inside of the rack. So you need to space these out appropriately. The space between this 2x4 and the edge of this 2x4 is going to be 20 and 5/16 of an inch. You need to use 3.5-inch screws, again, pre-drill, countersink, and use wood glue. You're going to add the next one as well. The space is identical, 20 and 5/16 of an inch. And you're going to add your last one. So again, 20 and 5/16, and same over here. Everything should align nicely. You can use a spacer to make sure that everything is identical. All right, now you're going to add 2 more of these blue components. So these are identical to the bottom ones here. And if you remember, it's 88 and 3/4 of an inch long, 2x4. So you're going to attach it with 3.5-inch screws, pre-drill, countersink, and use wood glue. At this point, your rack is almost finished. You need to make sure that the rack doesn't sway side to side. So I recommend you add these L-shaped brackets. And I'm going to link the ones that I used for my project in my garage. And I'll let you know why I like those specifically. So where these brackets going to go, they're going to go on the top and bottom to make sure that the rack does not sway. So you're going to add it to the edge here, and I used 3 screws to attach that. The reason why I like the bracket that I purchased from Amazon is because the pre-drilled holes were more in the center of the L-shaped bracket. If it was on the edges, which some of them are sold like that, it makes a weaker joint. All right, so your rack is finished, but now you need to attach it to the actual garage, and you need to secure it so that it doesn't topple over if someone climbs it or if the weight is not evenly distributed. So to do that, you can use these L-shape 2x4 ties. So you will need to add 1-inch screws to attach to the rack, and then 3.5-inch screws to attach it to the actual studs. Now, if we remove the drywall here, you'll see that it's very important that these align with the actual studs of the garage. And you can use a stud finder to be able to do that, or look up different techniques on YouTube on how to find the actual studs. This part of the video is for the 4 wide by 4 tall tote rack. This rack is specifically designed for the 27-gallon tote from Costco, Lowe's, and Sam's Club. The overall dimensions of the rack will be 91.5 inches long. The rack is 30.25 inches deep, and it is 65 and 7/16 of an inch tall. The first thing you're going to need to do is gather your supplies. You're going to need 22 2x4s that are 8 feet long. The first cut that you're going to make will be for 32 identical shelf supports. The 2x4s need to be cut at 30.25 of an inch long. Now, if you notice on the edges here, I do cut the 2x4s at 45-degree angles. There are 2 reasons for this. One is easier sliding. The angle guides the tote into the rack. And then 2 is tote protection. It prevents the tote flaps from catching on the otherwise sharp 90-degree angles. So to cut the 45-degree angle, you would take the 30.5 or 30.25 inch 2x4. And then about halfway through, so 3/4 of an inch, you're going to cut off the edge here in the blue at 45 degrees. And then you'll do the same thing on the other end as well. The next step will be to create these ladder structures. So we have our white components here. These are the shelf supports from the previous step. And we are introducing a green 2x4 here. This is going to be a 62 and 7/16 of an inch long 2x4. And we're going to be combining the 2 components together. So the first shelf support needs to be 10 and 7/16 of an inch away from the edge here. The next one is 11 and 15/16 of an inch from the previous shelf support. same over here, same over here. And then in the end, you should be left with 2 3/16 of an inch. Now you need to combine these two together. You can use 2.5 inch long screws. Don't use longer screws so that they don't poke through. And I definitely recommend that you pre-drill the holes for the screws and countersink the screws. Also use wood glue for additional strength. You don't want the wood splitting. So you're going to need to make a total of 5 of these single-sided ladder structures. Now, some of these are going to undergo a modification. The modification is you're going to add one more layer of shelf supports directly on top of the first layer. So the spacing is going to be exactly the same. The first shelf support is going to be 10 7/16 of an inch away from the edge here. The next one is 11 15/16 of an inch. And then same here, and then again we're left with 2 3/16 of an inch left over. So just like before, you're going to use 2.5 inch screws to connect that, pre-drill the holes, countersink the screws, and then add wood glue. So you're going to have a total of 3 shelf supports that are going to be, or 3 ladder structures that are going to be double-sided, and then 2 that are going to be single-sided. The next step is to combine everything together. We are now introducing a new 2x4 here represented in the blue. This one is 91.5 inches long. And you're going to be adding the single-sided ladder structure. It needs to be facing inward, and you're going to connect it with 3.5 inch screws. I definitely recommend that you pre-drill the holes here, countersink the screws, and then add wood glue. You're going to do the same exact thing on the other side now. So single-sided ladder structure, 3.5 inch screws, pre-drill, countersink, and use wood glue. So for the center here, we're going to be adding the double-sided structures. So to do that, you're going to space these out. These are going to be 21 inches apart. So from this edge of the green component to this edge of the green 2x4, it's 21 inches. And you're going to use 3.5 inch screws, pre-drill, countersink, and use wood glue. The next one is also going to be attached here in the same way. Again, we have 21 inches. And then the last one here is also attached 21 inches from this edge and 21 inches away from the previous one here. Again, use wood glue, countersink, pre-drill, and add 3.5 inch screws. The next step is going to be to add 2 more of these blue components. These are going to be the same size as the ones on the bottom here. So 91.5 inches long. Go ahead and connect these with 3.5 inch screws, pre-drill, countersink, and use wood glue. At this point, your rack is almost finished. To prevent the rack from swaying side to side, you do need to add these L brackets. I'm going to link the brackets that I personally purchased for my product or my project in my garage, and I'll explain why I like them in a second here. So where are these going to be added? They're going to be added both on the bottom and the top, and they'll be added to the edges of the rack. So the reason why I like the ones that I purchased is because the holes that they have here are pre-drilled more in the center of the bracket versus on the sides. This makes for a stronger joint. So I added 3 screws and I attached all of that together. The next step is very important. You need to secure your rack to the actual garage studs. This is to prevent the rack from toppling if somebody climbs on top of it or if the weight is unevenly distributed. Very important that you tie it together. So in this case, we're using a L-shaped bracket here as well. You can purchase these at Home Depot, Lowe's, online. Lots of places sell them. So you're going to need to connect these to the rack first. You can use 1 inch screws to do that. And then we're going to remove the drywall here for a second. So this is to help you visualize that you need to connect these directly to the studs of the garage. Otherwise, if you connect it to the drywall, it's not going to help at all. So you can use a stud finder to do this, and then go ahead and connect it with 3.5 inch to 4 inch long screws. Hey, thanks for watching. If you wanted a printable PDF build guide, I will have it linked below. You can print it or download it to your phone and use it offline in the garage. It will have everything you need to be successful in building a rack. See you next time.